Hi, Stacey.
Hi.
How are
Good. Thanks so
you?
much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. And for reasons, well, let me just start over. I was excited to have you on before, but then when we were chatting before, I didn't realize you were a veteran or that you're in the Air
Yes,
Force. You're a nurse in the Air Force
I
right
am.
now. I love veterans. I mean, that might sound kind of weird to say because I
Because
am
you
a veteran.
are, and we love you too. You are epic. This is a big deal.
This
Yeah.
is a big deal. So today with us, I have Stacey Stegenga. I
Yes.
practiced that,
Nailed it.
and you will nailed it. She is a nurse, a registered nurse. She has her bachelor's degree from University of South Alabama, and she is an Air Force veteran. She's going to tell us all about it, but she's a nurse in the Air Force now. And then how I found her was on Instagram because her Instagram is called Invest for Freedom. Is that
Yes.
right?
_RN. But yes, you'll find me with that part.
Okay. Invest for Freedom _RN. And I hate when people say the word obsessed, but it's actually appropriate in this context with options.
Hmm.
I'm obsessed with
Yes.
options because they lead to freedom.
Yes. 100%.
And you won't feel trapped if you have money, investments,
Hmm.
other options besides feeling stuck in what you're doing.
Yes.
So
This is why I
I can't wait.
fangirled over your podcast so much because I was like, the branding, everything just speaks to me on such a deep level. And also, I do consider myself a black sheep. So I'm just like, oh, this is so good.
I love it. I feel maybe it's being a woman in the military. You can tell me how
Yeah.
you think. I didn't even put this in our topics, and I can cut it out if you want me
No.
to. But sometimes you feel like you're on your
Yes.
own. You feel like you're on a world on your own. And one thing I've never talked about, especially being in the Marines, there are very few women in the
Yes.
Marines. There are even fewer women that are officers in the
Yes.
Marines, which is what I
Yes.
was. And I loved my time. I had a great experience. I had great leaders. I had great male leaders.
Yes.
I had a great experience, but it could be
Yeah.
lonely.
It sure can. It can.
And leadership can be lonely.
Yes.
And I think Colin Powell, he was in the Air Force. Was Colin Powell Army or Air
I actually
Force?
don't think, I don't remember that he was Air Force. So maybe
Ah,
he's
I think he
Army.
was
Okay. Yeah.
Army.
Because I was like, I
Yeah.
don't remember.
I remember one of the quotes in one of our halls. It said by Colin Powell, leadership is lonely.
Hmm.
And anyway, so gosh, I'm so excited to talk to
Yes,
you.
and you're a baddie
Oh,
if you can make it through Marine boot camp. I'm like, that's a big deal. Don't think I'm not going to tell your audience. You're a big deal.
well, thanks. You're very sweet. All right. So I always start out. Where are you located and where are you from?
Yeah. So that is a complicated question. Anybody that's in the
Right.
military, this is a loaded question. But I currently reside in Denver, Colorado. I've been here for 5 years now. But I was
Okay.
born and raised in a small farm town right outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hmm.
Okay. So you're on a farm,
Yes,
farm
I grew
town.
up on a farm. That is true.
Oh my
Hmm.
goodness. Okay. And so you're in Denver
Yep.
now. So what got you into nursing in the first
So
place?
it was actually the military. So I joined the Air Force straight out of high school. I was 17. Really, the intention behind that was because I was the black sheep. I'm like, schools for people that actually pay attention. I had no focus. The ADD was onset early. I just wanted to travel the world, do fun things. What is this sitting in a lecture hall business? So that's why I chose the military. So joined straight out of high school at 17 and then went overseas after only a year and a half. Really epic experience, completely changed my life. Talking
Oh my
about
goodness.
being alone, being a
Mm,
minority is such a life changing experience.
yep.
So I was over in Turkey first,
Okay.
and learned a lot. But then through that experience of being overseas, I was like, well, I don't know what's next for me. I love the military. I felt very stagnant. I was
Mm,
enlisted at the time, so I made rank really quickly, and just didn't feel that purpose. So I knew I wanted to go into medicine. The one big kudo I will give myself is that I actually shadowed an occupational therapist because I had a cousin that had a spinal cord injury. And seeing
mm,
him being able to write again or drink or do these things was so impactful that I thought that's what I wanted to do. And no shade against occupational therapists, but once I started following them, I was like, this is not what I want to do. So long story short, it scooched me over to nursing. I was like, this is it. We've got the adrenaline, we've got the demand, yada, yada. So that's the route I went, and enrolled in South Alabama's accelerated nursing program because I already had a bachelor's at that point.
Okay, so were you still in the Air Force when you went to nursing
I
school?
was in the reserves. At that time, I still owed them time on my contract, if you will.
Okay.
There was a point after that where my time ended, but I got out of the Air Force as I was a nurse in that beginning stage.
Okay. So what was your, just so everyone knows, an
Mhm.
MOS is a military occupational specialty. So when you first went in as a 17-year-old, good
Mhm.
gracious, what was your MOS?
So I was actually a systems analyst, and it's so
Okay.
fun that you asked that question, because of the budget cuts from the war. Because I came in 2004, so we were at the heat
Okay.
of the war, and all the money was
Yep.
going towards that. They actually eliminated my job. And so my entire reason that I was able to go to 8 different duty stations in 8 years, all 4 of them overseas, was because my job was essentially eliminated and I did special duties. This is like unheard of in the military.
Wow.
So if it wasn't for that, I don't know that I would have even made it in 8 years, but systems analyst, so it was like techie, geeky things. I had no business being that. Like, what were they thinking? Tell me the ASVAB is a pointless test without telling me it's a pointless test, because y'all, I have too much personality for a computer. Like, no.
This seems like a good fit for her.
Literally.
So you said 8 countries
Mhm.
and 8
8
years,
bases, because I was
8 bases.
in 8 years.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned Turkey, where
Yeah, so
else?
I went from, so I was at Scott Air Force Base in St. Louis first, PCS to
Okay,
Incirlik in Turkey, and then
okay,
went to Aviano in Italy, and then
okay.
not mad about that one. Deployed,
No.
went to Kuwait, went to Korea, and then came back stateside and was in, Fort Walton Beach, and that's where I started the nursing school process. Mhm.
Okay.
Um,
Wow. So cool. Do you miss all that international travel, or are you still doing
I
it?
still do it for myself. It is totally different when you get to submerge
Yeah,
yourself in a culture like that. It is next level. So I
yeah.
really miss that, but having my freedom, as you can tell from my Instagram and all of the things, freedom is a very strong core value of mine. And yes, people tell me often they don't understand how I made it as long as I did in the military.
I I know, but I what they teach you,
Hmm.
that sort of discipline, because I was only in the Marines for 4 years, and actually it's about the same, well, not the same time. I went in 2001 after, my first degree. So my first degree is in Spanish from Texas Tech
Oh, so
University,
cool.
and, people are like, "Oh, what are you gonna do with a Spanish degree?" And I'm like, "Well, speak, obvi." And then like, "Wait, I need to earn
Yeah.
money." And so I was gonna do teaching. I was gonna be a Spanish teacher. Well, my Spanish at the time, my Spanish now is actually better than it was back
Oh,
then.
wow.
It was
Yeah.
mediocre at
Yeah.
best. And then, which that's fine. But I did my student teaching,
Mhm.
and I'm like, hell
Yeah.
no. No,
Yes.
no. I want to get out. I didn't want to go be a teacher in a small town in Texas, which that's totally fine, but I wanted to go.
Yes.
I wanted to get out. I wanted to have
Yeah.
adventures. And so my dad was a Navy corpsman actually in with the Marines in
Yeah.
Vietnam.
So cool.
And so he had always talked about, even when I was in high school, he's like, Erica, you should go into the Marines. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
dad, that is so
Yeah.
dumb. And of course. And then I'm coming back around 5 years later, which I found myself doing many times with my dad, coming back around and being like, oh, you were right.
Yes.
And so I said, Dad, I want to do this. And he said, yeah, I bet you do. I was right. So he was totally
Uh,
supportive. But anyway, that was 2001. And then I got out in
yeah.
2005. And it was in the thick of it.
Yes.
I went to Iraq in
Exactly.
2004, came back in 2005, and then I got out. that summer, which I was surprised because, during that time they had stop
Yes.
loss, stop
Yes.
move, at least for
Yes.
PCSs. And they had just, I guess, released that because I was able to get
Yes.
out.
And thank goodness, because there's no worse feeling than
Oh,
being
yeah.
held
Yeah.
against your will.
Yeah, but circling back to what you said, and people were so surprised that you stayed in so long
Mhm.
because you have this thing about freedom. I'm the very
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
way. And people are like, "Oh my God, you went to the Marines?
Mhm.
I can't think of anything less free." Or the military, Air Force, I can't think of anything less. That gave me structure. That changed my
Yes.
life.
And I feel like that's what the number one thing that people say for entrepreneurs, that structure
Yeah.
actually creates the freedom because
Yes.
you're honed in, you're focused, you nail down those things, and then the rest of your schedule is open. There's very much a truth to this. It's hard to articulate, especially when comparing to the military, but
Yeah.
100%. I agree.
Yes, and the discipline that it gave
Mhm.
me, the confidence that it gave
Yes.
me. When you have confidence, you have
Oh,
freedom.
that's what I think that saying is. Discipline creates freedom. It's something to that effect. I feel like Jocko Willink says
Something.
it or somebody. So, of course, Jocko would say that.
Of course, he says all the right
Yes.
things. Of course he does.
It is so true, though. There is truth.
It is, and I mean, that set me up for the rest of my life, and, we talked about this before we started, and that's why I started the whole podcast,
Nice.
is to show nurses, look, I understand that you feel
Mhm.
stuck. It's easy to feel that way, and you can
It
get stuck
is.
sort of in that mindset, but you actually have
Yes.
options, and that options leads to freedom,
Mhm. It sure
Stacey.
does.
You won't feel trapped if you feel like you have options that are actually tangible, that you can get more information about, and you've got to do your
Yes.
part. You
Yes.
can't just sit there and say, "It's gonna just drop in my lap."
100%.
Here's some ideas. How about this idea? How about this
Yeah.
idea? So, anyway, enough about me. Back to you. You were in Florida, you went to nursing school.
Mhm.
I have, how is nursing in the Air Force even organized?
Very differently.
Yeah.
Um, what do I say about this? I still need to work on answering some questions like a politician. Gosh, now that I'm on this side of things, it's a skill that I really appreciate, how they answer things, but they actually don't answer anything.
Right. That's maddening to
Yes,
everyone.
yes. So the Air Force nursing is extremely fulfilling because we're taking care of our brothers and sisters, essentially, is
Right.
what we call each
Yeah.
other. Um, it's the politics, just
Mm,
it's so incomparable to the hospital, but just as maddening in a very different way.
yeah.
So there's still that entire system of, you know, leadership and management. It's so funny to me sometimes how much they correlate, but they don't.
Right.
But anyways, yes.
Well, and it can be very corporate,
Yes. Yes.
and they probably have a lot of similarities in that way. Maybe I'll ask instead of, because that's a big question, maybe I'll ask this way. What options, when you're like, okay, I'm in the Air Force, I'm going to be a nurse, what options did you have for like a first job?
So that is one of the cool things. The Air Force, and I feel like actually the military in general, the Navy most specifically, has a
Mm,
very impressive medical program and specifically nursing program that's very, very impressive. For the Air Force, though, they take us places and they'll train you. So you might get assigned to trauma right out of the gate, but they're going to at least train you. It's not like on the civilian side where they're just going to like throw you to the wolves and you have to fend for yourself. The Air Force is going to
mhm,
send you to a whole bunch of, I dare I say, I don't want to say it's cushy, but it's just like things that we would never see on the civilian side. They
mm.
frequently send people to like Maryland, for instance, into that Baltimore hospital. I can't remember the name of it, but they do trauma training. Um,
Is it Johns Hopkins?
it might be, I forget.
There's another big one.
Yes.
I can't remember. MedStar?
No, it's definitely not that one.
Okay. I
But
have to
at any
look.
rate, I will say they do an extensive amount of training. Now,
Mm,
and their nurses are very well prepared. The issue becomes though, and this is I feel like the biggest challenge with nursing in the military is that your population that you're most commonly serving are active duty members. So they're
mm,
young, fit, healthy, right?
Right.
there's only so much you can do talking through scenarios and codes and mock situations to keep your skills up in
Right.
those other components, or a sick or a complicated patient that has like multiple issues. So that is what I would say the biggest downfall is.
Mm,
I became a flight nurse specifically in the Air Force, thinking it was going to give me a level of skill that I had not had on the civilian side. And it couldn't have been further from the truth,
mm,
because our patients are typically so stable. Now, this is not to say that flight nurses in the Air Force don't fly sick patients. They did. I just flew in non-war years. So I was a flight nurse from 2014 to 2018. And,
okay.
so you don't have those IED blasts. Not that we ever want that, but you're
Right.
not having those very complex traumas and evacuations and things that people might experience in other times. So
Right.
it was still very fulfilling. The patients that I did get to fly home, I would say, no better job, truly, when you get to do that.
Yeah.
It's just those moments are too few and far between for me to dedicate my life to that.
Yeah. I was in the ER up at a hospital in Orange
Hmm.
County, and one of the trauma surgeons, I think he was a
Hmm.
reservist, and, he would
Yeah.
deploy from time to
Yep.
time, and I think that's probably like, I don't was he a reservist? I don't I he couldn't have been active duty, but he worked at the hospital probably to keep his
Yes,
skills
and
up.
that's exactly, you see that so much. And so then I would
Okay.
come on orders and everybody would be amazed by my skill, cuz like, we coded a kid and cannulated him in the ER the night before, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's so cool." And I'm like, "We're supposed to be critical nurses flying people home. Don't act so impressed." You know, Bad example, but you get the sentiment of what I'm saying. Like, it
Right.
was, yeah. I thought that I was going to be flying, picking up some really intense situations, doing cool stuff, and it was just way more calm, cool, and collect than I wanted it to be. So,
Yeah. I had another friend, her uncle was a Navy
mhm,
doc, and it was exactly what you
yes,
said. It wasn't exactly challenging
mhm,
because you have all of these young, mostly men, but strapping men and
yes,
women who are
yes,
young. They're healthy.
mhm,
They don't have hypertension and kidney
yep,
disease and on dialysis and diabetes because if they
exactly.
did, they would have been screened
Yes,
out before they would have been allowed in.
yes,
And so he would go on ships and twiddle his
mhm,
thumbs because everyone's
yes,
healthy.
yes. It's a totally different world, but
And I will say a question I get a lot. They're like, "Oh, you're a nurse. You must have been a nurse in the military."
mhm,
No. Marines fall under the Department of the Navy.
correct. Yep,
Marines do not have
yes,
nurses. They don't have any medical. They do not have I don't think they no, they don't have spiritual. So any sort of
those
uh
elements of the
yeah, we will go to a Navy hospital or there would be clinic on base,
mhm,
but it would be
yep,
Navy. It's not just like, I was telling you, did I say this already? I forget. My dad was a
mhm,
corpsman in Vietnam. He was
yeah.
Navy, assigned to a Marine
Yep.
unit.
So that, yeah, I was like, your audience probably won't know, but they call them green and blue corpsmen based on who they're assigned to, but the Navy still owns all of them. So,
You know, this is so funny. My dad tells this story. He joined the
mhm.
Navy and he got seasick all the
Oh my
time.
God.
And
You can't make that up.
I know. It's kind of like, do you remember that movie, A Few Good Men? And he's like, I don't like
Yeah.
ships. And she's like, you're in the
Yes.
Navy. What are you
Yeah.
saying? And so he got off the ship and he's like, what else can I
Yes.
do besides be on a ship? And they're like, well, you can be a
Yes.
corpsman. And that's what he
Yeah,
did.
he's like sold. It's actually,
Yes.
gotta love those Vietnam veterans, man. I feel like they influenced our generation so much. But that's
Yes.
actually why I chose to become a flight nurse too. I didn't even
Oh,
know. I had already been in the Air Force active duty for 8 years at that point. Didn't even know we had flight nurses. Literally. I was in nursing school, and the director of my program at South Alabama, sure enough, it's like Judy Azak. I don't know if I'm supposed to say her name, but she's an angel of all
oh,
sorts. Um, but she told me, like, she had deployed randomly during Vietnam to be a flight nurse, and showed me like all of the pictures. It was the coolest thing. And that was when I was
wow.
like, I want I want flight nursing. So I had to fight for it. in the
Yeah.
military. They really make you work for those things. Had to go to SEER. Got to
Oh, you did.
got to be the only woman in a male class of 33 men.
Tell everyone what SEER class is.
SEER is when you go play war games, essentially, in
Yeah.
a very large wooded area in Washington,
Hmm.
and you fight for your life to survive and play war games.
Yeah, because they basically just
Aggressive war
release
games.
you. It's aggressive. It's aggressive. And I think they dump you out in the middle of nowhere and they're like, we're coming for
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Figure out a way for us not to get
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
will
you did that.
say my favorite part, though, was actually being with males. I
Yeah.
thought for sure that I was going to be the weakest link. There's just all those pressure moments of being a woman and like, am I going to be the one to hold this up? Am I going to be the one to fail? Just like all these different things. And then
Yeah.
being medical on top of it, I already had 4+ years of critical care, 2 or 3 at least. And so my responsibility in there is also to medically care for all these men, in addition to myself, in addition to surviving what's happening as the only female. And I looked at the instructors and I was just like, are we serious right now? Like, I'm like hanging on by a thread, but you want me to save somebody's life while I'm at it. Cool. I love this for me. I obviously survived. So
You
it
did.
is my point though was it's beautiful to see the way people have different strengths that come out.
Yeah.
And when you're in an environment like that, you can really lean on other people. So it ended up being a very beautiful display to me of that I can be weaker in some moments and they'll carry the slack. And then in other moments, they need that and I help them. So
Yeah.
just that symbiotic relationship. So,
Well, I think that's why veterans come back from the war
mm-hmm.
and they're
Yes.
bonded in ways that other people just will not ever
No.
understand. And they can tell you war stories all day and you still won't get it
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't been over
Yes.
there yourself. That's why they tend to stick
Yes.
together because there's just, I don't know if it's unspoken or like you and
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're
Yeah.
saying. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying. And it's just shared experience. There was
The trauma
I never
bonding.
Yes,
Yes.
well, I was gonna say trauma bonding, but it's the same, of course, in, Marine
Yes.
speak. He had this massive tattoo on his back, and it said, "Pain breeds loyalty."
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And that's, code for trauma bonding.
Yes. And that's what somebody else made. It was a meme about the military and like how everybody's so close and they're like, yeah, trauma bonding. But it's
Yeah,
also to me, it can apply so much to healthcare too, because honestly,
yes.
healthcare is the closest experience I've had to that because of the
Yeah,
camaraderie and the things that we bond over in healthcare are so similar to things that you would never see outside of the military, like loss of life and just like the most challenging moments of life, seeing people in their darkest moment. So that's
yeah.
unfortunately, I think one of the reasons why I was so attracted to healthcare. Um,
Well, it's teamwork on an amped up
yes,
level. It's
yes,
connection. It's, shared experience for a shared mission
hmm
and goal to where you feel like you're doing
yes,
good, and that's hard to replicate in an office setting.
yes, yes.
So, I get
Yeah.
that.
I was going to say too, and with that being said, that has been my biggest deterrent towards business and towards entrepreneurship and towards anything outside of nursing is because I was so put off by that office setting, the stuffiness of what
Yeah.
I thought business was. And this is something that I appreciate the most about your podcast because when I first had the idea to get out of nursing, it was already in 2015 or even 14. I had been a nurse less than 2 years. And
Mm,
when I thought about going into business, and both of my siblings are in business, both of them have their MBAs in vastly different industries, though.
yeah.
I would sit there and think about it, and I would be like, I, being the black sheep, am not made for an office. I'm not made for politics. I am not made for stuffy environments. I need to be able to speak my mind and be active and be challenged and be all of these things that I did well at bedside and in the military, right?
Yeah.
Didn't relate to business at all. And what I appreciate the most is that you are giving all these different options to people to try on.
Yeah.
Maybe I can be like the legal nurse. Maybe I could be an investor. Maybe I can be. And I think those little seeds will change somebody's life way more profoundly than me taking me 10 plus years to find my way to this, because I had an identity that I told myself I can't do business. I can't do entrepreneurship. It's too stuffy for me. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. That's very nice of
yes.
you. I did not pay her to say that. Everyone, that was not in the notes. It was not required.
Not required. It is my honest opinion, because I it's hard for me to not regret looking back at what I've done in the short amount of
Yeah.
time. I am proud of myself. And if I wasn't so stuck in that story of telling myself that I
Yeah.
wasn't made for business because it was too stuffy or too whatever, what would my life look like had I started essentially almost 13 years prior?
Yeah. Well, that's why I love doing this, because the whole tagline, it's Black Sheep Nurse, but I made sure in the beginning to put basic nurses doing really cool
Yes,
things, because we all went to nursing school.
literally.
We all graduated and knew
Yes.
nothing. And look at these
Yes.
millions of
Yes.
options that you can do. And like you said, just plant a little
Yeah.
seed. I mean, I'm not going to give you the answer because I don't know all the
No.
answers. It's hard to do in a 30-minute episode, the answer to every single thing. That's a little
Yes.
seed.
Well, and it's going to be
Here's
different
the
for
seed.
everybody too. So I
Right.
think
True.
that's perfect anyways, but I just
Yeah.
hope that
Yeah.
people can realize that before it becomes too late. Like, I've worked in probably 8, I haven't actually counted, specialties in nursing, because I was
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, but I felt stuck and stifled and all of these things, and I was trying to find where I belonged and where I could
Yeah.
work in medicine that didn't feel abusive. And
Right.
so I just hope that somebody listens as that brand new baby nurse instead of waiting like me after 8 different departments and specialties and certs and all this training just to be
How
like,
many acronyms do you have behind your name?
yeah, a lot. 3, I think, is I was like 2 certs and then flight nurse, but too many. Too
Oh,
many.
too many. So what kind of nursing are you doing now?
So I work in research, and this
Okay.
was all totally random. I started in the ER, finished in the ER bedside. Um, COVID, I was already burnt out, like
Yeah.
massively burnt out. COVID just like really put a fork in me. So I, no joke, was so desperate. I went to my favorite hospital in the city and applied to, and this probably sounds bad. I hope my manager doesn't hear this, but I applied to like literally any job, and it was probably 10 or more that wasn't in a department that I had already worked in or was something I would be willing to try. There was this
Really?
listing that said something to the effect of like resource project nurse or something. So I knew it wasn't like a resource float nurse, because
Yeah.
it was something with that project in there. Long story short,
Yeah.
I applied, had no clue what it was, interviewed, and they told me enough about it that I was like, this sounds awesome. Let me give it a shot. And then boom, here I am almost 2 years into working research, but I am still excited to leave altogether. Let me make that clear.
Oh my goodness. So you were saying before you retire in 2025
Yes, from the Air Force.
from the Air
Mhm.
Force, and you think you'll continue nursing?
Yes, not in the capacity that I'm currently in. We'll
Okay.
see. One of the biggest things that I'm apprehensive about is real estate and investing has become my passion, my life raft.
Yes.
It's become a lot of things. I
Yeah.
am truly endlessly grateful because of the opportunity and the things that it's provided for me.
Yeah.
And I am very protective of it not being my only source of income, because that is the same way that I place the pressure on nursing. And I kept doing it because I thought I needed the money and I thought I could get more money that way. So I just don't want to do that to investing. I want it to be my source of freedom and only that. So yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see. But I definitely want to step away from bedside or hospital settings completely, because I am so passionate about speaking out advocating for changes in healthcare, it
Yeah.
has been extremely stressful. The amount of like retribution or retaliation, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. Just sounds a little
Mhm.
aggressive, but um, the amount of backlash that I get trying to advocate for what we deserve
Mm.
is really stressful, and so I'm very excited to finish replacing my income, so that I don't have to have something held over my head anymore.
Well, that's the perfect segue in to what I wanna talk about next, because that's how I found
Yes.
you. Your Instagram is invest for freedom underscore
Yes.
RN, is that
Yep.
correct? And that's how I found it, because I love investing. I love different buckets of
Mhm.
income. I love this idea of not being locked into one thing,
Yes.
whatever it
Yes.
is. It's kinda like what you just said, not being locked into real estate, not locked into
Yes.
nursing. What other bucket can I pull from? So tell us a little bit about what you talk about on your
Yeah,
Instagram.
so it's largely just free education of all of the lessons that I've learned so far in real estate, and also just different strategies, ways to get started, different things to consider. There's like nursing with real estate investing, there's so many different avenues of success and so many different ways that it can look and feel. So I just
Yeah,
like talking about all those differences to show people that, like, for instance, if you only know about your neighbors that Airbnb failed and they lost a cajillion dollars, that's
yeah,
one way and one thing. So I just like showing people that there's so many different ways and so many different um, beautiful strategies and things that you can do. So my Instagram is all free, um, education on all of that. But then also, I'm just building that community. Um,
yeah.
I do hope to make a really big impact on nursing before I leave. And that's kind of one of the other big reasons that I started, in addition to changing nurses' lives. I just want to be able to impact healthcare, and then little mic drop is the way that I'm dreaming of it currently. It could change, but
Stay tuned.
yes, TBD. TBD.
Okay, well, remind everyone where we can find you on Instagram.
It is invest for freedom underscore RN.
Stacey, thank you so much for coming on. This was so
It
much
was
fun.
so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
Okay, I'll see you on social media.
Yes.